She has some notes here, and I think she wants to maybe elaborate on what I said and add you to a gift to you, or add to this program those things that she wants to say, or at least she's being forced to say. Okay, Mrs. Cryer, Cookie, as I call her sometimes. I call her just about everything. Most of the time I go get her. So she's sitting right here, and I won't have to do either one. So here it goes over to her.
Well, I was named Lola Sadie Dunn, and I was born here around Buna somewhere. I don't remember just exactly where, in the neighborhood of where I'm living now. Some 67 years ago. And, let's see. We lived here in the country until I was 14, and we moved to Evedale then and lived there for up until, I don't know, till I married. I guess we lived in Evedale till I married. And but in the meantime, I determined from the time I could remember that I was going to be a school teacher. I just had to teach school. But once I got to be a teacher, I didn't like it so well. I went to Jasper to summer normal and took a lot of courses, and luckily I passed all of them and got a school to teach. Let's see, where did I teach first? I don't remember, but I ended up teaching in Williamson Settlement. I taught 2 terms down there, and that's where I first heard the gospel, huh? No, I didn't teach in Roganville. But I taught school for 5 years altogether. With the last 2 years I taught down in Williamson Settlement. And, I knew my husband from the time he was just a little boy. He used to come over in our yard and play marbles with my young brother. He was a couple of years younger than I was, but in actual age, and he was a whole lot younger in lots of other ways. He was just a little old boy that was playing there with my brother when I met him, but he was growing up pretty fast, and I got to paying attention to him, and I never did pay any serious attention to anybody else anymore. We went together about 5 years, off and on. He was too young to be married, and we weren't thinking too much about that, but we were very much in love. But while I was in the Williamson Settlement, I got converted to the gospel. But I didn't join while I was down there. I just had a funny feeling about it. I felt like that someone would say that pressure was exerted on me. It wasn't at all. And I can recall when I first went down there, the first Sunday I was there, they had told us at normal school that we must go to church wherever we were. That was one of the things. And that's all the church there was down there. So I knew I had to go. The lady I boarded with asked me to go with her, and I told her I would, but I was just scared an inch of my life. I'd heard so much about these terrible Mormons, I didn't know what I was going to hear. And so the Sunday school lesson was very, very interesting to me. And shortly after that, we decided to hold a Bible study class on Sunday afternoons. And my mother sent me a good new Bible for that study class. And I really enjoyed it, and we had wonderful times down there in Williamson. There wasn't nowhere much to go, but we met together on Sunday afternoons at some of the homes, and we'd sing and play dominoes and things like that. And we really had a good time. Well, I taught there 2 years. And let me see where I went from there. I guess I didn't go anywhere else from there. I came back to Evedale, and see what she got here. He's already told you about us tearing his coat pocket out on one night on a trip from the place where I worked home. We used to go down to Brother Walter Kirkpatrick's every Sunday. There was always a group of elders there. They must have had a lot of elders out then, because there was always a group of elders down there. And then they had two boys about our age, and they had a player piano, and we'd go down there on Sunday afternoon and play that player piano and sing songs and just have a wonderful time. I had no serious thought at that time of joining the church. I liked it. I was interested in it, and I just almost knew that was what I had been looking for all my life. But there was an elderly widow there in our town that I'd go over and go with her when they'd have church during the week. The elders would come there lots of times. They'd have meeting at Kirkpatrick's during the week. Or sometimes they'd have it at her house. And so one night we were coming from Kirkpatrick's, and she says, "Why don't you be baptized?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to, but I don't know how." And she says, "You want me to arrange it?" I said, "Well, I wish you would." It was cold as blazes. It was in February. And she must have went back there early the next morning down to Kirkpatrick's and told them that I wanted to be baptized, and they sent me word I'd have to be there by 8 o'clock. They had to leave. And the river was just almost frozen over. It was so cold. Frost spewed out around the grasses all around. But that's where I was baptized, right there in the river. And it as cold as it was. I had on plenty of clothes. I remember I had an old thick blue serge dress, a heavy blue serge dress that I was baptized in. And so I was very interested in the church after that. And Daddy was going with me, but we had church at Evedale, had a Sunday school there in the afternoons. Well, he'd stay at home in the morning, I think, nap. And then when I'd come from Sunday school, he'd come over to my house and stay till bedtime. And I got to telling him about how good looking I thought one of the Kirkpatrick boys was, and I think he got kind of scared, so he decided he'd go to church with me after that. And so he commenced going to church, and he got interested too in the gospel. But before that time, while we were still living in the country, before we moved to Evedale, my daddy made very poor wages in his work. It was logging, contracting work. Mama nearly always had a bunch of boarders that she fed, made lunches for and all, to help pay expenses. And she wanted all of us kids to have an education. And she sent us up to Buna school because it was a better school than the one that was a little bit closer to us there in the country. And I remember I had an awful time with my math. That's what they call it now. They called it arithmetic then, but I had an awful time with it. I just couldn't seem to get it. Well, the teacher in this other little country school was boarding just across the road from where we lived. And my mother went over and made a bargain with her that she'd do her washing and ironing every week if she'd help me with my arithmetic at night. Coach me in my arithmetic at night. So that's how I passed it. And this woman helped me every night. Well, Mother was willing to go to all that work for me to try to get an education. And we lived out there until I was 14 years old when we moved to Evedale. We lived there at Evedale for a number of years. I went to school from there. I went to 2 terms of normal school. It wasn't like college is now. You didn't get any degree or anything like that, but you'd get a certificate to teach. I was 16 when I went to teaching. Started teaching school when I was 16 years old. I really wasn't supposed to. They wasn't supposed to give me the examinations there in normal school. They didn't ask me how old I was when I started. And I finished my term, and we went to take the examinations. We had to state our age. And when I told them I was 16, well, they said I was too young. I couldn't take the examinations. You had to be 17. And they counted back my birthdays. That was in June or July, and I'd be 17 in October. And they decided I was closer to 17 than I was 16, so they let me take the examinations, and I passed them. Well, the first year I had my certificate, I was awfully proud of it. And I wanted to teach somewhere, and I heard about a school down in Orange County, almost south, a little bit south and west of where Vidor is now. There was a little country school out there. And I went out there and applied for the school, and our county school superintendent told me about it, and I went down there and applied for it and got the school. And I went out there and taught for 1 year out there with those people. And I made some good friends there, and I enjoyed it a lot, except there was 2 classes. I mean, the classes were divided into 2 groups. I taught up through the 4th grade, and the other teacher taught the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. And there were some fully grown boys in that 8th grade. And they found out somehow that I was deathly afraid of lizards. And I was sitting at my desk one day, and a couple of these boys were just outside at the window. We didn't have screens on the windows like we had here. And they just walked up there and I was kind of bent over my desk that way, and my collar was standing out, and they just pitched a big old lizard down my dress neck. And they said they did, and I thought, well, maybe they didn't. But I couldn't be still, and in a few minutes I felt that thing come its crawl on me, and I all but pulled my clothes off right there in the classroom. I got back behind the petition and got my clothes off and got that lizard out of there, and I was just so nervous, and it was just crying. I just couldn't do nothing. I couldn't teach the rest of the day. I had to go to the house. I boarded there right close by, and I had to go to the house, and I felt like that teacher should have done something to that boy for that. But she didn't. She thought it was funny. It was just as funny to her as it was to him. So that just about ruined my first year there. And I came back then and come back home, and let's see, where did I teach the next year? Oh, they had started this compulsory education law. You had to go to school 6 months out of half of the term anyway, each kid did. So they put on an extra teacher there at Oakdale. We had to divide our big auditorium into 2 rooms. They using just 1 room, and had put up curtains, divided in 2 rooms. And I had the 4th and 5th grades. And the superintendent of the school, the principal or whatever you want to call him, who taught me the other part of it. I taught there until my time was up. We just taught the first 4.5 months, something like that. And then it wasn't compulsory the rest of the time, so I taught that. And after Christmas of that year, the school superintendent wrote me about another school that above Jasper needed teachers. And I went up there, applied for that job, and went up there. And the people that were supposed to meet me at the station didn't meet me. And there I got off out there in the dark, cold, unfeeling world, only January, and nobody to meet me, and I didn't know which way to go hardly, but there happened to be a taxi there. And that man agreed to take me out there. It must have been a good 15 miles, and I think about it now, in the cold and the dark and everything, that man I'd never seen or heard tell of before, rattling out there in that old Ford taxi. But I got there anyway. We started the school, come to find out there wasn't but 1 regular pupil. There was 3 others that were supposed to go there, but they didn't ever come. And so we had to walk about 2 miles. And it snowed, oh how it did snow. And we walked over to the schoolhouse, and we'd been there about a week, I guess. I'd been there about a week just teaching that 1 girl. And she was the daughter of the lady where I boarded. She and I had come up there together, and we came in there one morning, And there was still a fire in the heater. Somebody had a fire in there tonight. They cooked coffee. We could smell coffee in there and cigarettes all over the floor. And we just packed up our books and closed the door and struck out home. And her daddy was a school trustee. And he said, well, he didn't want us going up there anymore, just the two of us. And said he didn't have time to go take us every day. But he told me to give her lessons right at home. And I did. That's what I did. I taught the rest of the balance of that term there, just giving lessons to that one girl. Well, after I come back home, I think it was then that after I'd come back home that I joined the church. I believe it was. And Daddy was interested in the church, and he was converted. Yeah, I was baptized just a little while before we were married. And he was converted then. He would have been baptized, but he was afraid that if he was baptized before we married, people would say, I made him be baptized. I wouldn't marry him if he hadn't been baptized. I did feel that way about it, but I was so thoroughly sure that he was converted, so I didn't let it worry me a great deal. And a great big old burly elder was baptizing him there in the river. He was a whopper, a great big old man. And he just doused Daddy right over face first in that water, just like surprised him to death and like strangled him to death. And he said, well, he never had seen anybody baptized. And he said, when some children around their neighborhood was baptized, so they'd take them down to the irrigation ditches and hold them by the hand and dunk them in. That's what he said. Now, I don't think that was true, because even their hands would have needed to have been wet, but that's what he said anyway. Well, we didn't know whether that was authentic or not, so they said they'd find out. And they wrote to headquarters about it, and they said, well, if he was satisfied about it, there was nothing wrong with it. So he said it was all right to him, so he's the first person on the record that we know of that was baptized face first. And we had as he told you, we had our little home fixed there at Eastville when we married. We moved in it. We got our things moved in it the day we married. We married pretty early in the morning up here in this Methodist church. They'd hear it Buna. We lived at Eastville, but there was no preacher of any kind down there, and we'd written to the elders to come and marry us, and they didn't show up for some reason or other. And we went up there, and a Methodist preacher married us, and we come back and started keeping house that day. And the next day, the elders come Saturday afternoon. That was on Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, they came in. It was a regular appointment time. The first Sunday, they always preach their evening. So we cooked up a good meal before we went to church Sunday morning and got up there and invited them home with us. They come and ate dinner with us the first day we kept house. I mean, first Sunday we were there. So Daddy's told you about us leaving there and where we went and all. We lived there. This little house where we lived there at Eastdale was over behind the Negro quarters from the main town. And there was bunches of niggers, groups of them passing the road in front of our house day and night almost there. And Daddy had to leave before daylight to go to work, and I was just deadly afraid to stay over there by myself. He had an old pistol. I saw that old pistol somewhere around here the other day. And he polished it all up and loaded it and gave it to me, and I shot it a time or two, but I doubt I could have shot it if anybody had got after me. But I kept it handy anyway. Wherever I went, if I went in the kitchen to cook, well, I had that laying on the cabinet by me. If I went to the bedroom to do something, I had it. And in the living room, it was the same way. I kept that old pistol handy all the time. So I was kind of glad when we moved away from there on that account. Didn't none ever offer to bother me or anything, but I was scared of them just the same. While we lived there at Woodgate, when the children were little, Daddy had to run the picture show, the mechanics of it, and he could never go nowhere on Saturday night till after the show was over. And we didn't have a car, but we'd rent a car, and we'd come clear down here, about 60 miles, I think it was, in a car after the show was over at night. We'd get down here about 12 o'clock next morning and go back in Sunday evening. The country up there around Weirgate was mostly sand hills and scrub oak, and oh, I hated it with a vengeance when I went up there, but I soon got to love it a lot. And after Helen was born, well, we went out in the woods a lot and down on the creeks. There was such pretty trees there on the creeks. And when Helen was about a year old, well, Daddy decided to go to Chicago to electrical school. So we got everything all fixed up, and I came down to stay with my folks while he was gone. And a day or two before we left home, well, Helen fell off the bottom step at the front and broke her collarbone. And we had to have it all taped up. Her little arm was just taped up to her, just as tight as Big Hat does. And we brought her down there like that. And it was so hot, she was fretful, she cried a lot. And I really had time with her at first. I don't know what I would have done with her. But Floyd's stepfather, Grandpa Walter, he'd just carry her by the hour all over town and just walk around with her. He kept her happy. And then I had never seen Mamie, my brother Crockett's wife, until then. And Helen fell for her, too, and she just let Mamie do anything with her. So that made things a whole lot easier on us. And we stayed there until, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks he was gone. Well, but just before he came home was the time to take the bandage off her low shoulder. And we took her to the doctor that was there in Buna. It wasn't one that bandaged it up. And he just took that little old thing down and just peeled that bandage off of her hide and all. Oh, that was the awfulest mess I ever saw in my life. She just cried and cried and cried. And she was 2 or 3 days getting over the soreness of that. There are lots of after we went up there, after Bonnie was born, she's about 2 years old. Well, my brother got out of work down here and couldn't get a job anywhere, and they had a baby coming, and they needed help, and so we invited them to come and live with us up there. And we took them in, and their baby was born there. And they stayed there, I don't know, about 2 months, and they moved in a house of their own, but they didn't stay up there very long. He went back to Beaumont and got a job there. And they moved back to Beaumont. We, our main entertainment was during the, what is it when times were so hard? Depression years. Well, we had just bought an old radio, our first old radio, and we'd get the Grand Ole Opry on it. And that was all entertainment we had, was to listen to that Grand Ole Opry. And this girl that was here the other night, this Owens, Winnie Ruth, well, her parents lived right behind us, and her mother could make the best syrup taffy you ever saw in your life. And she'd come over there and make a whole bunch of that syrup taffy, and we'd all sit around and listen to the Grand Ole Opry and eat that syrup taffy. And we had several pretty good friends there. There was Aldine Mullins, it was a special friend of Daddy's, and then these Denman peoples, and a Miss Harris and a Miss Jones, that was especially friendly to us. And then when Daddy went to work at Beaumont, we moved down there. Why? It was pretty hard on me. It was hard on him, but it was hard on me, too. I had never used a telephone. You may not believe that, but I'd never used a telephone until he called me from Beaumont to tell me the plans for moving down there. It just scared me to death. We didn't have one in our house. I had to go down to the lumber office to answer the telephone, and it just scared me to death. Well, I never used a telephone or anything in it. I was taken down there and dumped in the city, and no way of getting around except on the city bus. And have to go and stand in line for hours and hours to get sugar ration books, and things like that. Food was all ration. And it was quite an experience for me as well as it was for him. It was good for me. I realize that now, but it sure was hard at the time. I had to learn the bus schedules and how to get around town on the buses. Even the church meetings we had. We didn't have church house. We had to go to people's homes. We'd have Relief Society at a different home every week. And I had to learn to do that. Yeah, it was 1942 and 3. And we lived in Multimax and one of these housing projects for a long time, and then we bought a place out in 4300 block of Steelton and moved out there, and we stayed there until we moved up here to the home place and built this house and built our chicken coops, and our gardens, of course, was all a part of it. And Bonnie got married here, but Helen got married in the meantime while we were still in Beaumont, and she never did come up here with us. Bonnie came up here, but she married later. And then my daddy died, and then old grandma, my grandmother, died, and then my mother died, and one of the little things that I failed to mention before was when we lived at Weirgate and worked up there for the lumber company. Well, every Christmas, the company there would have a Christmas tree, and they'd give us big bags of fruit and nuts and candy and so forth, and then they'd also give us a turkey, a big turkey. They had a big pen built, and they put the turkeys in this pen, and we'd go down there and get our turkey when they came in. We could go get it early, or we could leave it there till the day before time to kill it, but usually they were picked over if you didn't go right away. So we'd go get our turkey, and we have turkey for Christmas. And then another thing about this turkey pen, it was a big, nice place, fence with a high fence around it, and when the Depression came on, well, the company quit giving those turkeys to people, and there was that big fenced-in plot there, and it was all clean where the turkeys had cleaned the grass off of it. So we didn't have as much garden space as we wanted at our house, so we asked for permission to plant that turkey pen and garden truck, and we did that one year, and we made a lot of corn and beans and peas and things in that turkey pen. And then when another thing that we didn't mention, in 1944, we hadn't been in Beaumont very long, and heretofore, there hadn't any of the missionaries much that came along had said anything to us much about going to the temple. In fact, it just didn't cross our mind that we could go. But after we moved to Beaumont, of course, we had a lot more money there to spend on things like that, and then they began stressing going to the temple, so we decided that the time had come for us to go to the temple, and Daddy couldn't get off for just a few days, less than a week. And Helen was working. She couldn't get off but a week. But we took our hard-earned money, and we had to go on the train, and we had to stand up the biggest part of the way. Part of us did, because the train was loaded with soldiers and sailors and servicemen going to and fro. But we rode this train into Mesa, Arizona. That was the closest place we could get. It cost less to go there, and we could get back quicker. So we went in there and had our work done. And just before we left, well, our district president told us that he wasn't too sure that Helen could be sealed to us because she was already 18. Well, it just broke my heart. I said I didn't want to go. I just wasn't going if Helen couldn't be sealed to us. And he said, well, don't take my word for it. He says, you talk to the mission president about it. So when we went out to the mission president to get our recommend, well, we talked to him about it. And he said, well, I'm not too sure. He says, go on out there and see. He said, go whether you can have her sealed to you or not. He persuaded us to go. And as soon as we got out there, well, we took it up with the temple president. And he said, no, he wasn't there, but whoever was acting in his place, I forgot who it was. He'd gone somewhere else on a trip or something. And he called him, though. He was coming home. And he said he thought it could be handled because she was near, or as near 18 as she was 19. And so we went back to him the next day. He said he'd hear from him by the next day. In the meantime, this mission president was in a car wreck and got badly hurt. But this recommend came right on through. We really felt fortunate, felt like the Lord was with us by it coming right on through in spite of him being in his car wreck and getting all bunged up. And they agreed for her to be sealed to us. So we were very happy people when we could have her sealed to us and have our whole family together again. And of course the years passed and we left Beaumont and came up here. And funny thing about our gardening and our chicken yards, we had 3 chicken yards, and well, that's all right, honey, I can hold it, thank you. We had 3 chicken houses, and we had 2 yards to each chicken house. And we'd run the chickens on one yard of a house, and we'd garden the other half. Well, the years passed, and Helen moved to Austin, lived up there a long time till Dale finished the university, and then they moved back to Beaumont, and she worked a good while. And then she had a family, 3 children, and they were fairly close by. Bonnie's family continued to increase. We didn't get to see them too often, but every reunion was a wonderful reunion with us. We made several trips out there, and they made trips here. And that brought us up to 1966 when Daddy retired from his job at the shipyard and spent all his time at home. And he's been able to do a lot of work here at home, things that we've been wanting to get done for a long time. And we have really enjoyed this year and a half that we've spent here since he retired. And we hope we'll have many more happy years ahead of us. That's it as far as I know. Seems to have left some things out as I've gone along. When the children were small, I think the baby was 3, Bonnie was 3, and Helen was 7. We had a bunch of missionaries at our house. I say a bunch, 4. They were tracting that country up there in Newton County, and they spent their time with us. And one of them was an elderly man, and he said that he thought it'd be a good thing if they'd ordain my husband a priest so he could bless the sacrament and we could have the sacrament at home. We had a little kind of a home Sunday school, nobody but just the family, but we'd have that every Sunday morning. And after he got the priesthood, well, we'd have the sacrament every Sunday too, just like there was a whole bunch of us. And so we enjoyed that very much. It seemed like that was something just to tide us over. And we went on the creek a lot. We couldn't go to our own church except that little home Sunday school, and that didn't take much time on Sunday. And we spent our spare time on the creek, just walking around and doing things like that. And we started to walk across the creek. There one time, it was very shallow, the water was, and we were just going to wade right across it. And we got about the middle of it, and we come going down, sinking, down, 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 and there wasn't a thing to grab to or anything to get a hold of. And the children were out on the bank, and they saw we were sinking, and they were scared, and we were scared too, and they come in hunting boards and limbs and things, and they found a big old piece of board they could throw in there to us, and we managed to get out on that. But that's about the worst scare that we ever had in our life. In just a short time, we'd sunk in that quicksand. We couldn't have ever gotten out of there if it hadn't been for that. And another thing that was quite interesting, each child has its own peculiarities. Bonnie's was pets. She had a pig, a little bitty pig. I don't remember whether somebody gave it to her or where we got that little pig. But she raised it a pet. She just loved that pig better than anything. And we had it in a pen there by the house. And it grew, of course, and time passed. And he got so big and unruly we couldn't keep him in the pen hardly. He was always wanting to get out. He'd root out and tear the fence down or something, so we decided to kill him. And she just couldn't bear the idea of that pig being killed. His name was Oscar. She just couldn't bear the idea of Oscar being killed. So we told her he'd have to go. We just have to have him killed. And she says, well, I won't eat any of him. I can tell you that right now. And so the day we had him killed was on a Saturday. We sent her over to the next little town to one of our friends' house, and she went over there and spent the day. She wasn't there when Oscar was killed and dressed and packed away. And for a long time, she wouldn't eat any of the meat, but she eventually got to where she'd eat it. Then she has another neighbor gave her 2 little Easter biddies, these little colored ones, you know, they colored Easter time. Seems like there's a law against that now, but it wasn't then. And this lady gave her 2 of these little Easter biddies, little bitty things. And she raised those up, and one of them happened to be a little hen, and the other a little rooster. And when they got grown up, they were Dominickers, what we call those big old black and white speckled ones. And she'd walk all over that place with one under each arm till they got so heavy she could hardly carry them. And we had to get rid of them then when we moved from there. We couldn't take them with us. I don't remember what we did with them. Probably give them to somebody else. But those were her pets. She really loved them. Is that all of it, Harold? Yeah. Way back to the past when I must have been about, I don't know, 8, 9 years old. I don't remember just how old I was. We were playing hide and seek one evening just before sundown, just before dark, after sundown. And we had a trail through the woods out to the road, and I went and jumped over that, there was a log across it, and I jumped over that log to get out there in the edge of the woods to hide, and something popped me, and I looked down and saw it was a snake. And so that snake had bit me, and I hollered for help. And some of the folks came out there and saw the snake and killed it and took me in the house. And it was hot weather. I was barefooted. And they wrapped my ankle in bandages and soaked it in kerosene. And that's all the treatment that I remember having for it. And I remember I was sick for 2 or 3 days, but I don't remember any details of that. It was so hot, Mama fixed me a pallet on the end of the long porch that we had across our house. And I laid there on that pallet, on the porch, and until my foot got to where I could walk on it. It was a very uncomfortable experience, and I've been deathly afraid of snakes ever since then. One of the things I'd failed to mention was that Bonnie was always a great hand to sing. She loved to sing, and she could learn songs easily. And she and Helen would learn lots of the songs that they heard played on the radio. And when we'd go down to my mother's to visit, they'd sing those songs, and Bonnie could sing the soprano, and Helen would sing the alto when they were very small. But we went to Methodist Church there because we didn't have any other church to go to, and they were always nice to us. And they got Bonnie to sing in there in church. They had a lot of special singing there in that church. I sang there a lot, and Bonnie sang a lot. And the pastor's wife there played the piano, and she'd get a song for Bonnie to sing, a little song. We'd go up and practice it a time or two, and then she'd go up there on Sunday morning and sit her up on the corner of the piano. She was 3 years old at that time, about around 3. That went on for about a year. And she'd sing those songs just perfect, word for word. And, well, she was just about the size of Amy when she started this singing. And it was quite comical. One Easter, my sister and her 2 little boys were visiting us for Easter, and they went to church with us. Well, each child had gotten his Easter eggs that morning and had them in their little basket. And when she started up there, she had a special song to sing at church. And so we decided it would be nice if she took the other children's eggs and put them in the basket with hers, so she'd have a whole basket full up there at church to sing her little song. It was a little Easter song. And so we put their eggs, borrowed their eggs, and put them in the basket with hers. And usually she'd come back and sit with us when she'd get through with her little song. We sitting way toward the back. And that Sunday morning, though, she sat right down on the front seat when she got through with her song. She stood up then, just stood on the edge of the rostrum and sang her little Easter song. That basket of eggs, and then she went down there and sat on that front seat. And when church was over and we finally went up there and found her, she had eaten her Easter eggs and the ones she'd borrowed too. And one of her little cousins was very unhappy about it. It took all we could do to keep him off of her. He was just going to beat up on her. But she always loved to sing, and she and Helen sang a lot together that way. Well, Bonnie wants me to tell about experience we had about a cow, but it's kind of vague in my memory. It was thrilling at the time, but I don't remember just how it was. We'd bought a cow, and she had a young calf, and she wasn't in the pen. She'd gotten out in the woods somehow. And we hunted her, and I think someone maybe sent us word where she was, way over there in the woods, and we went over there to get her, and it was in the dead of night. It must have been 10 o'clock at night. And we went over there. She was kind of wild, and we tried to drive her home, her and that calf. And we run all over those woods, and I don't remember whether we ever got the cow home or not, but we were out there in those woods, big old tall, towering pines. And we run all over those woods out there chasing that cow, trying to drive her home, her and the calf. And I don't remember whether we got her or not, but we probably did. We'd been there now chasing her.